Wonderful record. Ian Jury and the Blockheads, Hit Me With Your Rhythm Stick. A big favourite of our guest on Sounds of the 70s this afternoon, Rick Buckler, drummer with the Jam.
Good afternoon.
How you doing?
I'm fine, thanks, yeah.
Why'd you like that one?
I just think it's so off the wall, really. I mean, I like things that are a little bit sort of quirky, but that just, I mean, he's, like I was just saying, he's just like, you wouldn't sort of pitch him as being the, you know, the sort of stereotypical pop star, but they were, I loved them.
Talking about quirky and a bit off the wall, check this out. The Batman theme, as played by the group The Jam from their first album, In the City, came out in 1977. Rick Buckler is with us. And The Jam originally a four-piece, weren't they?
Well, yeah, we tried to stay a four-piece. Our idea of being a proper group was having four guys, like the Beatles, you know. But we just never managed to do that. And I think when we ended up as a three, we just tried it to sound like a four-piece.
So you were very young when you joined as a drummer?
Yeah, I was in my mid-teens, I suppose, 15, 16, so my later years at secondary school was when I sort of joined up with Paul. So, I mean, it doesn't seem like it seemed like quite late to start playing drums, really. I mean, you see people starting these days when they're 9 or 10 years old, but we just grew up together and, you know, and the whole group sort of formed musically together, so it was a good time.
So you joined the band as a drummer, even though you couldn't really play drums?
No, that's right. Well, I mean, I had some experience. I mean, I'd started a band with my twin brother and a mate who, you know, as a three-piece. But we didn't really do very much apart from... I mean, we were just big fans of music and we wanted to sort of do more than just listen to it. So it sort of started from there, and then I played various things at school bands and stuff, and Paul invited me to play the Shearwater Youth Club, which was a big gig in those days, you know, for us.
So I heard he just gave you a bunch of Chuck Berry records. Said, "Here, learn those."
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, I mean, it's all 12-bar. I mean, it wasn't that difficult. I mean, when we've done our first couple of shows, I mean, we knew the beginnings of all these songs, but no endings. So there's a lot of winking and nudging about when we should stop and start the next one. You know, I mean, it's. But yeah, it's. Yeah, it's just a great big, gave me a big pile of Chuck Berry records and said, learn that lot, you know. Most of them are all the same. They just changed the lyrics, don't they, you know.
It's amazing how much noise you can make, just three people. I mean, some of the great bands have been trios. And I always thought the Jam were the best kind of British band to come along following The Who, really.
Yeah, I think we tried to fill in all the gaps, trying to sort of be a fourth member amongst ourselves. You know, we had various guitar players and keyboard players and what have you in the very early years, and they just kept dropping out, and so we kept finding ourselves as a three-piece. I mean, Bruce joined us as a rhythm guitarist. We were looking for a rhythm guitarist at the time, and I think then he then moved over to bass. So when he played bass, he played it like a rhythm guitarist, which was actually quite an advantage because that filled that gap, you know, twofold, as being rhythm and bass, you know. So it worked out to be a bit of an advantage. But no matter how much we tried, we always ended up as a three-piece. So in the end, we just resigned ourselves to the fact.
So many gigs around Woking, the Liberal Club, the Woking Club, the sort of, you know.
Yeah, well, at that time there was a lot of working men's clubs, Conservative Club, Liberal, all that sort of thing that were going on, CIU clubs and stuff, and they all had. I mean, we played covers. So they all had bands on at the weekend. It was mostly live music, and we did covers of anything from the 60s and what have you. And so we were always in work. I mean, John, Paul's dad, he got us all the work. I mean, he was a cab driver, so he knew all these people in these clubs. So that was as an advantage for us. So pretty much we hit the ground running right from the early days of having places to play every weekend, Friday night, Saturday night, Sundays.
Then you started getting gigs in London, you know, in some of the pubs.
Yeah, we sort of got fed up with people, you know, playing. People who came along to see us were pretty much there at these clubs because the beer was cheap. You know, they weren't there necessarily to see us, and they weren't of our age group. So when we got the opportunity to move into the London scene, when we discovered that there was a really thriving pub rock scene going on in London, I mean, London's only 30 miles away from Woking, so I mean, it was just, we had to take a cut in money. We went from sort of like £15 a gig to a £5 a gig or something like that. But we thought this was worth it. This was more like what we want to do. And yeah, so we just moved into places like the Nashville and the Red Cow and, you know, the Marquee Club and that sort of thing. And just loved it. And it was from there that we really discovered that the punk movement was going on within that sort of scene. And because we played fast rock and roll, we sort of seemed to fit in quite well with what was going on in London.
Of course, another legendary band in the pub scene, really, they probably really helped start it all, was Dr. Feelgood.
Yes.
And this track I want to play from the first album again, Non-Stop Dancing. It's a bit of feel-good influence on this, bit of Wilco.
Yeah, I think when Paul saw Feel Goods, he realised you can play rhythm and lead at the same time, which was what Feel Good, they were really good at. So yeah,
the Jam, Non-Stop Dancing, just the sound of the band in their very early days, and that's from the first album, In the City. And let's remind ourselves, the Jam, in 5 years, all too short years really, from 77 to 82. They notched up 18 consecutive UK top 40 singles, including 4 number ones, and progressed from that sound to records like the Eton Rifles, which was amazing, wasn't it?
It was. I think one thing that went through our minds was we didn't want to become boring, so we were always looking to evolve and prove ourselves as well, not only to our audiences, but to the record company who were really they held the purse strings to our career. So we always felt that we were a lot of pressure really to sort of stay for everything that we've achieved, to keep it there as long as possible. So we worked really hard, I think, in those years.
Yeah, Rick Buckler is with us, drummer with the Jam. I mean, there was an awful lot of travelling, wasn't there, to gigs? And you opened for the Sex Pistols, didn't you?
We
for
did.
£10.
Yes. That's right. We got a phone call one night and said, would we drive to Dunstable to open for this band, the Pistols? I mean, Paul had seen them. I'd never seen them at that time. And I think it was their sort of warm-up show to their sort of debut tour or something like that. And there was about 12 people in the audience and a dog. I mean, there's nobody there at all. But I was really, really impressed with them. I thought they were absolutely fabulous. From what we'd all heard in the press about how punk bands couldn't play and all that sort of stuff, there was a lot of sort of media furore going on. I was really impressed with what they did. And even though there wasn't very many people there, they really played their hearts out.
They were a lot better musically than people gave them credit for.
Yeah, I think, they definitely
Especially
were, yeah.
Steve Jones.
Yes.
Great guitarist. Okay, let's play one of your choices here. And this sort of after punk, we got New Wave, then we got XTC.
Yeah, again, I like them because I think they're a little bit off the wall. We bumped into them at Townhouse Studios in Shepherd's Bush. We used to do a lot of recording there. And I'm not sure what they were recording there, but we bumped into them there, and I remember listening to the stuff that they were recording, and because drummers are always into like this nicking ideas about rhythms and this sort of thing, and I thought they had a really unique sort of sound to their rhythm. So there were things in there which were worth nicking, definitely.
XTC making plans for Nigel, chosen by our guest Rick Buckler, a drummer with the Jam. They really worked you hard. Was it Polydor Records? And that was an unusual signing for a punk band to go to Polydor, really.
Yeah, I mean, we didn't know any different. I mean, I think we were offered a couple of other record deals before that, where they smaller record companies. And they seemed like, they were a respectable bunch. So we thought, yeah, they probably...
Well, that's it. In a way, they were too respectable for a band like the Jam, but it worked out well. But
yeah, they were good. I mean, they looked after us all right, really. I mean, they certainly kept us busy, yeah, without a doubt.
I mean, this is the thing, you're driving all over the place, grotty hotels, cramped van, and then having to produce another album. Come on, fellas, let's have another. You did 2 in 1 year in 1977.
That's right. There was a lot of work involved in that. I mean, I thought we took it on. I mean, we just loved it. You offered us a show or anything like that. Another single, another album. Yeah, we'll do it. We were so enthusiastic about getting ourselves established that we just took it on, and it just sort of we carried on with that attitude all the way through, and we never put the brakes on at any moment, really. In a way, that was, you could easily argue that was probably it was part of the downfall, that we just drove ourselves so hard.
Yeah,
and nobody really took control. The record company were pretty much in control, and they pretty much managed our situation. If we had to do another single, because of contracts, then we did. We just simply did it. We're working hard, and we like playing live.
I mean, Paul's dad, John Weller, he didn't have that great an experience about being a manager of a rock band, but you certainly didn't mess with him when he was around.
No. I mean, he
was a tough guy.
Yeah, I mean, he was supposedly on our side and what have you. And when we signed to Polydor, they said that we should replace him. We should get somebody else. We should have a professional manager. And we said, no, we're not signing unless John stays as our manager. We stood by him in that. I mean, he'd been with us, from the early days, and we really felt that because we didn't know much about the music industry either, so he did take the advice of the record company and take their advice on things, and which worked out. I mean, he wasn't that silly. I mean, he did sort of take that advice on board. But on the other hand, I mean, it was just as much a learning curve for him as it was for us.
What was it like playing in America?
We found that a bit tough, actually, because we didn't know quite where to dip our toe in. I mean, the first tour we did was in the small clubs like CBGB's and those sort of places. That was in New York, and then we did some in Boston and San Francisco and the Whiskey Club in Los Angeles. And that was all right. That was sort of things that we were used to. But then after that, it became a bit weird. They put us on the road with Bebop Deluxe and Blue Oyster Cult and stuff like that, and we were at the bottom of the building. It didn't really...
Not the right mix.
No, it didn't suit us at all. We hated that.
Yeah. One of the fascinating things about the Jam, I mean, there's a ballad called English Rose on All Mod Cons, and then another one on Setting Suns, The Butterfly Collector, which became a huge favourite of my son Sam's. He was only about 12 at the time. But the idea of a punk band like the Jam doing these very slow ballads.
Well, I mean, it's easy to sort of label us as punk band, but I mean,
You're more than that.
Yeah, I think we were. I mean, we sort of came into the punk movement, but we cut our teeth playing ballads of other people's songs, and we were big Who fans and Beatle fans, and especially of the Kinks, the 3-minute song thing. The song was the star, really, I think, for us. So that's where our roots were. And although we were playing fast rock and roll, and we sort of came to the public eye during the punk scene, I mean, I think we always felt we were more than that. Musically, we thought we had more to offer. So, I mean, it was nice for us to explore all these different areas. I mean, I like some of those songs. They're more the things that sometimes they get forgotten, like Butterfly Collector, like Ghosts, like Carnation. They're the softer side of the Jam, if you like. But I think it was us just trying to explore as many different musical aspects for a 3-piece band.
The Jam and the Butterfly Collector. Rick Buckler, the drummer with the Jam, is here. So you're a London band. You go up north to places like Liverpool and up into Manchester and Scotland. Did they sort of like the Jam up there?
They did. Yeah, they seemed to take to us quite well. I mean, I liked playing those places. By the time we got there, after touring our way up the country, we were pretty much, the tour was well underway and we were well oiled. So by the time we got to places like, Newcastle and Liverpool, I suppose you really felt you were on the road, and it was so, and I like those towns anyway, so especially places like Newcastle.
So 1982. 5 years of the Jam, you'd really made it. You're travelling better now. It's a bit more luxurious. The hotels are better. You're having great success. And then Paul goes, right, I'm going to end it.
Yeah, it's a bit of a shock, really.
Massive shock.
Yeah, I mean, everything was going so well. I mean, we'd had #1 records. We toured everywhere we wanted to tour. There were still things to do. We still had musical ideas left. We still had a pocket load of songs which we hadn't released. Yeah, what could possibly go wrong? You know what I mean? It was one of those sort of scenarios. And then all of a sudden he said in the summer of 1982 that he wanted to leave the band. And I think John had tried to persuade him otherwise, and so had the record company. And we tried as well, myself and Bruce tried to persuade him that this was probably not a good idea. I mean, we'd put in just as much work as he had into it. It wasn't just about him. So we felt a little bit sort of sidelined when we weren't consulted at all about it. But I mean, the amazing thing was that we just quite gentlemanly walked towards the end of that year, 1982, fulfilled our commitments, added a few more shows in London and Brighton and etc. You
remember the last gig?
I do remember it. Yeah,
where was that?
It was Brighton on the 11th of December. I remember the date. I mean, it was something that we'd sort of got into, really, finishing off a UK tour just before the Christmas period. And I remember, looking into the audience and seeing how I felt on the faces of people there, because I think they were probably just as disappointed or miffed or upset or whatever. It was a mixture of emotions, really. And it was a strange thing to read through the set list on the drum kit, thinking, I'll never play this song again. It had finally sort of struck home. I think all during that tour, I certainly felt maybe Paul will change his mind. Maybe he'll go back on this. Because we played so well, it was probably one of our best tours that we ever did.
Wow. So you get home after that final gig and you think to yourself, oh, blimey, what now?
Well, exactly. I mean, the reason for getting out of bed for 10 years for me was the band, and to find that it suddenly wasn't there was a bit of a shock. I mean, I suppose I can only equate it to sort of suddenly being made redundant. Finding that you know, what do you do now? So that was a bit strange. I didn't really sink into me until the new year, until after the Christmas thing had finished, and you start looking forward. You're normally picking up news of what you're going to be getting up to that year and gigs and stuff like that, and it was a complete blank sheet. So you think, well, where do we go?
Well, you got a lot of great memories to look back on, which are chronicled in a new book called The Dead Straight Guide to the Jam, which is an incredible book. I mean, all the details of the gigs and the recordings and so much information. Anybody who considers himself a fan of the Jam has to get the Dead Straight Guide.
Yeah, I mean, it was great to do because when I did the autobiography, it's really a sort of personal story from my story, if you like, for being in the band, and I left out a lot of the facts and figures, and I didn't really talk about the albums so much and the songs. It was really just what it was like to be in a band at that time. So to be able to have to put that other side of the story, I just picked 50 songs, and a friend of mine, Snowy, helped me do it, and we just looked at the experience of writing the stuff, recording it, playing it live, putting in a lot of, like, say, facts and figures about the tours and the dates and that sort of thing. So it was a good experience. I mean, it was again, it sort of throws up a lot of other memories. I mean, for anybody who was there, and certainly for me.
Well, thanks for coming in this afternoon. It's great having you as a guest.
No, thanks very much.
And all the best for the future.
Cheers.
And a reminder that the book is called The Dead Straight Guide to the Jam. Rick Buckler with Ian.